In this video I'm going to go over some display setting suggestions for modeling with polygons in Maya. The first suggestion is to go to Display, Heads-Up Display, and turn on Poly Count. This is a really useful heads-up display. It lists out the different component types and then 3 columns of numbers here. And I'm going to go over those now. So the first column is the total number of that component in the scene. So in this case there are 988 faces in this whole scene. So this is a really useful column for trying to get to a particular target or stay below a target. If you're doing low poly modeling or something like that and you know you have 5,000 polys to work with, it's very useful just to have this available at all times so you get a sense of where you are in that working process and how much further you have to go. The second column gives you the total number of faces or any component type in the actively selected object. So in this case there are 910 faces on the sphere and 78 on the cube. And if I select both objects, I'll get the total of the scene, in this case because I only have 2 objects, 988 faces again. So these 2 columns match. This column is really useful for being able to click through your objects and get a sense of where your poly count is going. So if you do have an object that's disproportionately high res, you'll be able to click through and find that pretty quickly and see how you're losing polys there, and then you can trim that down pretty quickly. This third column shows the total number of that component type that are actively selected. So in this case I have 4 faces selected, which will turn into 8 triangles on render. This column is really useful during selection process. So let's say for instance I know that I'm going to select 4 verts across here. So I'll just do a selection like that, but notice that my number here is 5, and that's obviously done intentionally, but it proves the point. It sort of gives you extra information that you wouldn't be able to tell from looking at it through this view. So then I could wipe that guy out, and there I'm down to 4. Obviously that's not how I would make that selection, but again it does illustrate the point here. The second selection, or the second suggestion, is to change Maya's default display of edges. So in this case, for instance, I have this sphere which I've intentionally sort of messed up here at the back. Here you can see this shading looks a little funky here. So the first thing I might think is, okay, well, those edges just need to be softened. So I'd select the sphere, normals, soften edge, and then it's still messed up. So then I have to try to figure out what the problem is. And there's only a few things in this case that would be the problem, but the point is you can add some extra information at basically no cost. So you can do that under Display, Polygons, and Custom Polygon Display. Now all of the stuff that's available in this window here, it's basically available here directly, but to change a bunch of things at once it just makes sense to do it here in the Custom Polygon Display. So I'm going to do this to all objects, and the default is just to have edges set to the standard mode, which basically means everything is a solid line. I'm going to switch this to soft hard, which just changes the display so that if an edge has been softened or is continuously lit, then that edge will appear as a dotted line, and hard edges will remain solid lines. The other thing that I turn on during modeling is border edges. So highlight the border edges. Edge width of around 3 tends to work pretty well. During UVing I'll turn on texture border edges as well, but during modeling I tend to like to have that off just because sometimes that can be distracting and make you think you have a problem with your mesh, and really it's just a UV shell. So these are my suggestions, just soft hard, border edges, edge width of 3. So I'll apply and close. Then when I select this, immediately you get some feedback. So here you can see all dotted lines, which means these are soft edges, so this will be continuously lit in a smooth way. And then here I see these bold edges. So this isn't a hard edge. This is what hard edges look like. Or I just did a complete softening on this thing. So let me just go ahead and go back to a set normal angle. And basically what this does is if it's below this threshold, it'll soften it. If it's above this threshold, it will make it a hard edge. So anything over 30-degree difference across an edge will result in a hard edge in this case. So I'll apply and close. And what I get with this is now this is what the display actually looks like. Soft edges are dotted, and then the solid lines here indicate a hard edge. So you can see that those are clean and faceted looking. This is the way I would want this to be. Back here, see how bold those are comparatively? These are the hard edges, and these are border edges. So border edges indicate that your mesh is not contiguous. You have some sort of mesh issue here. So in this case it would be as simple as just marquee a selection. I can even be really crusty with that selection and just edit mesh and then do a merge, and just make sure you have a really low threshold on this guy. And that way it will only merge things that are below that tolerance. So this is basically the verts have to be directly on top of each other for this to have an effect. So apply that, and now I can see that's fixed my geometry issue, and I'll still be left with this weird sort of stitches kind of look, but then I can go back and do another set normal angle on this. 30 is fine, apply and close, there we go. So that's some extra information, again, at basically no cost to you. And this is very useful also for troubleshooting normal issues. So if I have this selected, and I'm just going to do this through a shift right click marking menu, so bring that up and then I'll just turn that to soften. So this is very common to see on low poly models. See, the shading looks really rough and sort of dirty. Basically what's happening here is Maya's trying to smooth over an angle that's just too steep to really be smoothed over effectively. So in this case, it's very easy to see that what I have is, this is a 90-degree angle or so, and so are these, and they're all set to be soft edges. So basically that's just not going to work very effectively in this case. And I could tell by looking at the object even without having the edges turned on, but as soon as you select your object and you see that those are softened edges, you see exactly what the culprit is. So in this case, I could just go back to soften harden and do a soften harden, and that's just going to use that 30-degree threshold that was already set up. So you just get some extra information basically for free. And if you like those settings, when you make that change in here, it's not really a permanent change. This is just going to happen whenever you click apply and close on this. If you really want that to stick, basically you need to do it in your preferences. So Windows, settings and preferences, preferences, and then under display, polygons, basically just set it up to the same thing. Soft hard, border edges, edge width of 3 or so. Save. And now for all future scenes that you open, it will basically apply those same display defaults.